10 plus of those years, we partnered with NBCC in hosting the finalist readings, followed by the awards night. Each year, our MFA students interview the NBCC finalists, as well as the honorees of the John Leonard Prize and the Ivan Sandrof Lifetime Achievement Award. I want to offer my heartfelt gratitude to the authors for their candor and generosity in answering the students' questions. Thank you very much for that. The interviews are posted on the Creative Writing Program blog and then shared everywhere. I'm going to do a few thank yous before we get started. At the new school, I want to thank Laura Cronk, Ben Fama, Nicole Drayton, Victoria Richards, Elizabeth Lothian, Amwa Igobamian, and then in the booth, Sylvan Simon, way up there. And on the NBCC side, thank you to the board members for your diligence and truth in bringing great books to us all. And especially for making the 2 nights run so smooth and classy. Yadon Israel, the gracious MC of last night's readings and alum of the He's also an alum of the MFA program. You're doing us proud, Yadon. See you right there. And also at NBCC, our other friends, Jane Giavatari, Marian Winnick, David Varno, Kate Blue. Now I will turn the evening over to Kate Tuttle, the National Book Critics Circle President. And also, thank you, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Tuttle, President of the National Book Critics Circle. Thanks. It's been my honor to serve as president of the NBCC for the past 2 years, and tonight is my last night as president before we select a new president tomorrow. So it's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure to welcome you here tonight to the awards for the publishing year 2018. We're delighted to have you join us as we honor books in 6 categories: fiction, nonfiction, biography, autobiography, poetry, and criticism. I'd like to extend our gratitude to all the authors who are here with us tonight from all over the country and around the world, as well as their editors, publishers, agents, publicists, husbands, wives, assorted other spouses and family members, and everybody who supported them in their journeys. The National Book Critics Circle was founded in 1974 out of a conversation that took place at the Algonquin Hotel among a group of critics who wanted to establish a set of awards given by the critics themselves. Unlike other national literary awards, the books considered would come directly from nominations offered by the reviewers and book review editors who make up the NBCC board. Throughout the years, we've honored scores of extraordinary books, including, in the early years, Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, Susan Sontag's On Photography, and Sharon Olds' The Dead and the Living. In just the last few years since I joined the board, we've awarded prizes to a shelf of outstanding works, including Carol Anderson's White Rage, Matthew Desmond's Evicted, Sam Quinones' Dreamland, Louise Erdrich's La Rose, and Layli Long Soldier's Whereas. The NBCC has grown to include more than 700 members from across the country, plus more than 200 non-voting student members and supporting friends. It's also expanded to include the John Leonard Prize, honoring a best first book in any genre, the Nona Balakian Citation for Excellence in Reviewing, recognizing outstanding reviews by an NBCC member, and the Ivan Sandrof Lifetime Achievement Award for individuals or institutions that have made an extraordinary contribution to the world of letters. In these and many other ways, including the various activities, panels, and events that the NBCC sponsors throughout the year, the organization has grown far beyond what the founders might have imagined in 1974. As expressed in our mission statement, our goal is to honor outstanding writing and to foster a national conversation about reading, criticism, and literature. 2 years ago, the NBCC launched our Emerging Critics program that aspires to identify, nurture, and support the development of a new generation of book critics. Last year, we decided to name this program after the late Alan Chuse. Over the past 2 years, we've engaged the Chuse Fellows in an ongoing conversation about the craft, art, and ethics of book reviewing and the implications of changes in the publishing and journalism landscapes. We've drawn inspiration from these critics who are now near the end of their fellowship, and I'm going to name them now, and I hope you'll give them a round of applause at the end. Jenny Hahn, Natalia Holtzman, Tanner Howard, Noah Colwyn, Jonathan Leal, Chelsea Liu, Letitia Montgomery Rogers, Justin Howard Rozier, Lena Soman, and Hope Wabuke. Meanwhile, we're beginning to select the next class of emerging critics, and the deadline is April 3rd. So if you know anybody, or if you yourself are a writer thinking about entering the world of criticism, please feel free to check it out on our website, bookcritics.org. You'll see details there, and you can spread the word. Tonight's ceremony is the culmination of 12 months of extensive reading, discussions, arguments, and counter-arguments, both online and face-to-face. At the beginning of each year, the 24-member board divides itself among the awarding categories, and in the months to follow, we read as extensively as humanly possible in each of the categories. After the selection of our finalists in January, all 24 board members read every one of the 30 titles. There were 31 this year, as we selected 6 finalists in Autobiography. It's a 2-month reading marathon that is testimony to the high level of commitment by our board members. Earlier today, we met here at the new school and talked our way through each group of finalists. It went pretty well. We don't have any visible scars. Tonight, we're proud to name the recipients of the NBCC Awards. I'd like to ask that all members of the board now stand at this point so we can recognize them for their efforts. NBCC board members are elected to 3-year terms. Several members are at the end of their terms this year and will be leaving the board. And I'd like to take a minute to recognize them individually for their work. They are Tom Beer and Jane Chabatari, both of whom have served as president during their board tenures, and Beth Ann Patrick. Let's give them a round of applause. I just have a few more thank yous to make. We could not put together our free public events without the generosity and support of so many other people and institutions in the literary community. I'd like to thank in particular the New School University, and especially Laura Cronk, the interim director of the writing program, and Lori Lynn Turner, the associate director, who always makes things run so smoothly. We'd also like to thank Ben Fama. We thank the New School for all its hospitality in making their facilities available to the NBCC for our ceremony. I'd also like to thank Eric Banks, Melanie Rehak, and the NYU Institute for Public Knowledge, Noreen Tomasi and the Center for Fiction, James Kaplan at Quarles and Brady, LitHub, the AWP, Zizava, Lambda Literary, Brooklyn Magazine, the Brooklyn Public Library, John Reed at the New School, Connell Catering Group, Acker, Merrill, and Condit, and the Strand Bookstore, especially Kaylin Higgins, the events director there. A special thanks as well to the photographers Raj and B. Walker, who will be taking photographs of all of our winners tonight. A little note about that: when you win, if you walk up here to this side, you'll be given an award, and you immediately will walk over that way. Our friend Yadan is there. And Yadan will take you to the green room where these really fabulous art world stars will take your photo, and then you can return to your seat. Another note about the awards: the Balakian, Leonard, and Sandrof awards are inscribed and ready to go. But for all of the others, we didn't have time between deciding the winners and giving the awards. So this is a dummy award. Nobody's a dummy here, but it'll come back to the podium, and you'll get a really nice one with your actual name and the name of your book in the mail. One more note on that. I want to ask all the winners and all the board members, if possible, to linger a little bit after the ceremony for group photos that Raj and B are going to take in the back. A special thank you tonight to Beth Parker, who helps publicize the NBCC, and to Kate Ballou, who works with us on so many technical tasks. And just one last thing. I hope that you will all join us to toast all the finalists at our benefit reception immediately following tonight's ceremony. The reception will be held at a different location this year, so don't go to where you normally go because nothing is happening there. You will have to go to the Star Foundation Hall. It's in another new school building. It's at 63 Fifth Avenue. There will be plenty of people walking that way, so just follow the crowd. Tickets to the reception can be purchased at the door. This reception is the only NBCC event for which we ask a donation, and we greatly appreciate your support. In addition, the Strand Bookstore is here tonight. Are they here tonight? Yeah, they're here tonight in the lobby, selling copies of books by all the finalists and award winners, and we encourage you to patronize them. You'll find books for sale in the lobby just outside the auditorium. And now, to start things off, Board Member Greg Barrios will present the John Leonard Prize. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Greg Barrios, and it's been my privilege to serve as the Leonard Prize Committee Chair. The Leonard Prize was established to recognize outstanding first books in any genre, and it was named in honor of founding NBCC member John Leonard. Finalists for the prize are nominated by more than 700 voting NBCC members. The recipient is decided by a volunteer committee. This year, 70 members spent their holidays reading all of the finalists. I'd like to hear a shout out for those brave members who gave up their holiday to do this. At the end, the overwhelming favorite was Tommy Orange's There, There. Tommy Orange is a graduate from the MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. He is an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. He was born and raised in Oakland, California. In describing his debut novel, Native American novelist Louise Erdrich wrote, quote, "Welcome to a brilliant and generous artist who has already enlarged the landscape of American fiction. There, There is a comic vision haunted by a profound sadness. Tommy Orange is a new writer with an old heart," unquote. It is my great honor to present the John Leonard Prize for the best first book to Tommy Orange for There, There.
This one's not a dummy one. That's my name. Thank you for that introduction. I think I'd be more scared, as I usually am, and maybe this act of telling the audience I'm nervous before I go up is getting old. But I spoke in front of high schoolers today twice in 2 different 45-minute sessions. And that is the scariest thing ever. But they were very sweet. Not like I remember. So I looked up who John Leonard was on the flight here after hearing the pilot announce that all of the planes like the one I was on so sort of terrified. You know, there's no credibility in the person who made that order happen, but there's also like, you're flying improbably at hundreds of miles per hour in the sky, so it's, everything is allowable. But I was looking up John Leonard and seeing how brilliant and prolific he was, and found a quote that was, I think it was amazing. He said, "Why don't white men look for the heart of darkness in their own bathrooms?" And so I have a lot to learn from John Leonard, and I'm very grateful to be acknowledged for this prize under such a great person who was so considerate about literature. And I think literary critics get a bad rap. And Native American anything never gets attention. So for this all to happen this year and last year, to get notice of my book and other books that are getting attention is it's a good moment that I hope doesn't come and go like it has in the past. But I'd like to thank all the members of the National Book Critics Circle. I don't know, it's not a foundation, it's a circle. It feels very native for things to be a circle. It's very familiar to me. But I appreciate everyone's time and consideration and to acknowledge my book. Very grateful to Penguin Random House and Knopf for their undying support, and the incomparable Coll, Araji, my agent, and Gabrielle Brooks, and Jordan Pavlin. Just finding people who have a professional investment and personal investment in me and the book in ways that have been surprising. And I'm going too long. Thank you to the native Oakland community for embracing me both before the book came out and after. And thank you all for coming.
Former winner of the Balakian Prize, and I'm here to present this year's. First, I gotta get every year, the National Book Critics Circle awards the Nona Balakian Citation for excellence in reviewing to a book reviewer for his or her work. The award was established over a quarter of a century ago in honor of Nona Balakian, one of the founders of the National Book Critics Circle. This is the 7th year that the award comes with a $1,000 prize, the generous donation of board member Greg Barrios. Thank you. 2018 produced a very large field of excellent submissions, and the 5 finalists themselves were tightly bunched. They are, in alphabetical order, David Bieshbiel, Maureen Corrigan, Julia Klein, Becca Rothfeld, and Wendy Smith. And the winner is Maureen Corrigan. I'm sure that everyone here has heard Ms. Corrigan on the radio, where she reviews books for NPR's Fresh Air. She also contributes regularly to the Washington Post and reviews for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and many other publications. She's the author of Leave Me Alone, I'm Reading, a really excellent title for a person whose life and books are a unity. She's also the author of So We Read On, How the Great Gatsby Came to Be and Why It Endures. Ms. Corrigan also teaches practice in literary criticism at Georgetown University. She has other roles and accomplishments, too numerous to mention, but she's here today to be celebrated for her book reviewing. Fiction is Maureen Corrigan's bailiwick. When you read a Corrigan review, you're being treated to the views of a person, almost a friend, who's eager to describe what she's found, who addresses books on their own terms and does not pontificate. She does not analyze a work into smithereens. I really like what she wrote of Zadie Smith, one of our finalists in criticism, an observation which could also be said of her own best work. It's a rare piece of critical writing that can contemplate a mystery and deepen our understanding of it without solving it. That strikes me as precisely right. It points to the crucial and refreshing difference between book reviewing, the highest calling, and editorializing, the lowest. Congratulations, Maureen Corrigan.
That's a rare occurrence in book review. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm really genuinely so honored to receive this award from the National Book Critics Circle. It's special when you get an award from your peers, and I deeply appreciate it. I also want to thank Justin Rozier, emerging critic, for the interview that he did with me that was published today on the webpage. Justin's questions were excellent and made me think more deeply about what it is I do every week. I'm told I have about 4 minutes, which is perfect, because I have about 4 minutes every week on fresh air to do my reviews, so here goes. It's very powerful for me to be here at the New School to accept this award, because my reviewing career began a few blocks away at the Village Voice. I started writing for the Village Voice when I was in grad school at the University of Pennsylvania. I was writing about 19th century culture critics like Thomas Carlyle and John Ruskin, and like them, I was miserable. I was at Penn during the 1980s, the heyday of deconstructionist criticism. I hated putting my critical language through the deflavorizing machine of deconstructionist criticism. And I was alienated by the literary culture of Penn at that time, the English department, where we had mandatory Friday afternoon sherry hours with our professors to talk critical language. A friend of mine who was equally alienated in the history PhD program decided to apply for a job as an assistant editor at the Village Voice. And she asked me to help her with the take-home editing test. Now think about that for a minute. Who gives a take-home editing test? Right? Only the Village Voice. We stayed up all night. We worked on tweaking the review that she was asked to improve. She got the job, and she said to me, "Do you want to try to write a book review?" And it really was like someone had opened the door to a wider world of light and energy and just life in talking about literature. Many years later, I did come across a piece in The Nation about the critic Irving Howe after his death. And the person who wrote that piece said that Irving Howe taught us that enthusiasm is not the enemy of the intellect. I know I use that quote a lot, pretty much every time I talk to people, but that's a quote that is in my heart. Enthusiasm is not the enemy of the intellect, and when I began writing for the Village Voice, I could bring my whole self to those reviews, not just my head, but also my heart. A few years later, I wrote an expose for the Village Voice about my time as a grader for the AP English exam, then run by something called the Educational Testing Service. It was a terrible scam. I'm ashamed of those 2 summers, and I wrote an expose about the test for the Voice. I got a call from a producer at Fresh Air who said, we like this piece. Do you think you could shave it down and try to do it for radio? And I said, sure. I love Terry Gross. I was in Philly. I was listening to the show, which was then a 3-hour live show. I revered John Leonard, who was then Fresh Air's book critic, and I still think was the best all-around culture critic at work at that time in America. So I tried to do it. I mean, the piece for the Voice was about 55 million words because it was BLS, right? And our pieces for Fresh Air still clock in about 770 words. The producer who helped me learn how to write for radio is Naomi Person, and she's here tonight. And that was the best writing exercise I ever did. And my current producer for years, Phyllis Myers, is also here tonight. I really would like you two to stand up. We wouldn't be here were it not for producers and editors, and I've been lucky to have 2 of the best. I also want to give a loving shout out to Danny Miller, the executive producer of Fresh Air, and of course to Terry Gross. You've given me a life in books I would have never had without Fresh Air. Thank you. Writing for radio is of course a different animal than writing for print. I have to grab people where they are, in the kitchen, in the bathroom. One friend from grad school told me he was in labor and delivery with his wife when he was listening to me on the radio for the review. People are everywhere when they're listening to radio. So I feel like I have to tell a story, which is what radio does best. And radio is very personal. I am in people's lives, and I do use my voice to try to convey what I think and feel about books. Of course, not everyone is a fan. Radio is personal, so sometimes I get personal attacks from listeners. The best a few years ago was an email that arrived with the subject line, "Your voice." Never open up those emails. I committed it to memory. The writer, who I'm sure was a man, said that his idea of hell would be to be locked into a room with only my voice coming through the intercom. Everybody's a critic, right? My father, who was a steam fitter and a reader in his free time, a voracious reader, said to me when I did my first piece for Fresh Air, "That's great that you did that, but you know there's no future in radio." That was 30 years ago, and I'm so happy that he was wrong, and I'm so proud of the work that all of us do on Fresh Air to further books and to get the word about good books out there to all of America. It's just a fantastic medium. Thank you so much for this award. I'm so honored to have it, and keep listening. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Schaub, and for the past year, I've had the honor of serving as the chair of the Ivan Sandrof Lifetime Achievement Award Committee for the National Book Critics Circle. Each year, the NBCC gives this award to a person or institution who has, over time, made significant contributions to book culture. This year, for only the 4th time in the Sandrof Award's 37-year history, the board of the NBCC has voted to give it to an institution rather than an individual. Arte Público Press. Founded 40 years ago by Dr. Nicolás Caneos, Arte Público is the oldest and largest publisher of U.S. Hispanic authors in the world. The original publisher of Sandra Cisneros' classic coming-of-age novel, House on Mango Street, Arte Público publishes dozens of books each year, including titles under its children's literature imprint, Piñata Books. In 1992, Arte Público began its Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Project, which seeks to recover and publish lost texts from Latino writers from colonial times to the mid-20th century. Their dedication to publishing Hispanic writers in the U.S., past and present, and their determination to build bridges and not walls, has enriched and improved American literature and culture and made the United States a better and more inclusive place for all people. They have published some of the greatest writers in the U.S. today. One of those authors is here with us tonight. His name is Sergio Troncoso. The son of Mexican immigrants, Sergio was born in Isleta, Texas, a small town which is now part of El Paso. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University and earned 2 graduate degrees from Yale University. His books include the novels The Nature of Truth and From This Wicked Path of Dust, the short story collection The Last Tortilla and Other Stories, and the essay collection Crossing Borders. His next book, the short story collection A Peculiar Kind of Immigrant Son, will be released in October from Cinco Puntos Press. Sergio has received a host of honors in his distinguished career, including induction into the Texas Institute of Letters. But in 2014, he received what I think is probably the greatest honor that any writer can get. He had a library named after him. And if you ever find yourself in East El Paso, you can just take Zaragoza to Alameda Avenue, and you can visit the Sergio Troncoso Branch Library. It's an honor for me to be from the same state as him, and it's an honor for all of us here at the NBCC to have him here tonight. Here to present the Ivan Sandrof Lifetime Achievement Award to Arte Público Press. Please welcome Sergio Troncoso.
Thanks, Michael. Arte Público Press has taken up as their difficult task to make a community visible that has been, relatively speaking, invisible. Certainly at many of the expensive offices of the publishing world in New York. Arte Público is, as you know, the oldest and largest publisher of Latino literature in the United States. Since Dr. Nicolás Caneos founded Arte Público in Houston in 1979, what has mattered is that the struggle to create relevant, high-quality work by Latino authors and for the Latino community is now more important than ever. With about 30 books published every year, Arte Público is at once creating the future as well as preserving the past. For example, the press has focused on linking to schools to recognize Latino literary creativity. It is the largest licensor of literary material to textbooks in the United States for the Hispanic market. And its imprint, as Mike mentioned, Piñata Books, focuses on literature for children and young adults. Arte Público also conducts the largest program to recover all documents and books written by Latinos from the 16th century to 1960, with this project recovering the U.S. Hispanic literary heritage. You want the largest minority in the United States to read? Well, you better start focusing on writers who know the many variations of the Latino community. And you need to start publishing and promoting these writers. Arte Público has been doing that for decades. You want to get majority audiences to consider Latino literature as quintessentially American literature, the literature of the outsider and of immigrants, the literature of multilingual communities, the literature of civil rights and of finding a home in a strange new world. Well, you better start reaching into schools and communities so that the stereotypes of what people think about the United States-Mexico border, for example, in Fargo, North Dakota, or on Manhattan's Upper East Side, are upended by great books that encourage you to think, encourage you to consider these new, often young communities as groups of Americans trying to make it here just as your ancestors did. Yes, Arte Público had been in the empathy business, fighting for Latinos, before most of us in this room became writers. Pat Mora, Luis Valdez, Manuel Ramos, Nicolás Amor, Miguel Piñero, Américo Paredes, Sandra Cisneros, Graciela Limón, Luis Leal, Nina Jaffe, Rolando Hinojosa, Lindy Orio, Alicia Gaspar de Alba, Judith Ortiz Coffer, Diane González Bertrand, Miguel Algarín, and so many more Arte Público authors had sold tens of thousands of books and won hundreds of awards. Arte Público had been introducing, creating, and expanding this Latino literary landscape for all of us. My own experience with Arte Público is that director Nicolás Canelos is a committed scholar of all things Latino, an advocate for his authors, and a tough negotiator. I actually enjoyed the give and take with Nick, who is the heart and soul of Arte Público. Yes, the warm and fuzzy feelings of finding a home for my book of essays Crossing Borders, and my novel The Nature of Truth, and my international anthology of essays Our Lost Border. All of these feelings were there. But more importantly, I knew as a writer that they understood what I was doing on the page. They understood the readers I wanted to reach, and they cared about the many communities I wanted to change. In short, Arte Público has had that same mission that I've always had. They want to give voice to those who want in to this American experiment. They want to do it so that these voices are authentic and true to the people in places like Isleta in El Paso, Texas, or El Barrio of Spanish Harlem. I would be remiss if I also did not mention two of my other favorite people at Arte Público. Assistant Director Marina Tristan and Executive Editor Gabriela Baeza. Both are at the center of what make Arte Público thrive in the literary trenches. As an author at Arte Público, you know it's about connecting with readers. And this all starts with connecting with the people who are publishing your book. At every stage of the publishing process, this personal attention is what turns your book into something much more than a commodity to make some money, or a marketing plan to cover the huge overhead of offices on Broadway. With Marina and Gabi, your book becomes well-crafted words to reach and advance a community you love. A work of art that matters, Arte Público. That's why I published with them, and that's why I'm proud that Arte Público is the recipient of the Ivan Sandrof Lifetime Achievement Award. Please put your hands together for Arte Público Press.
Buenas noches a todos. Great to see you. I'm Nicolás Canelos, Director of Arte Público Press. Before I introduce our distinguished crew, I'd like to call out to Dr. Antonio Tillis, who's the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Houston, where we are located. Antonio, would you please stand up here? He's a great supporter of us. And this is Marina Tristan. She's the assistant publisher. Nelly Gonzalez, business manager. Carolina Villarroel, she's the Brown Foundation Director of Research. That's our big recovery program that Sergio mentioned. And a wonderful introduction. Gabriela Baeza Ventura, Executive Editor.
And Cedric, we cannot understate what a wonderful introduction you gave us, and we hope to live up to it. When we founded Arte Público Press 40 years ago, we envisioned it as part of the public art movement. Our books would draw from and give back to the community, reflecting its art, history, and culture, as well as its problems, like the muralists were doing. That's why some of our initial book covers, such as The House on Mango Street, were commissioned to muralists.
Like the mural walls, our pages would help to make our people visible, announcing, "We are here. We have always been here, and we have always contributed to life and culture in the United States." From the start, we were inclusive of all Latino ethnicities, religions, and genders, and sought to combat stereotypes while inserting ourselves into the national identity. As we grew, the mural became a mosaic, with each book becoming an individual tile in a large spectrum of varied images.
Like our writers, we're mostly children of the working class, the children of citizens, of families that have been here since before the founding of the United States.
I was an assembly line worker and a shipping clerk, weaving my box-laden dolly through 7th Avenue traffic in the garment district during the 1960s. Others of us, our writers, come from humble backgrounds, doing domestic work, farm work, and other manual labor.
We are the people selling the morning paper, but never appearing in it. The men and women washing dishes and waiting tables, but never savoring the meals. We are among the crowds on city sidewalks who individually remain invisible, never thought as writers or artists. It matters not that we're descendants of original settlers, intermarried with indigenous peoples and descendants of African slaves, whether immigrants were so for long ago or just yesterday, because no matter how long Latino families have resided in and contributed to the making of this country, we have been seen as foreigners.
No matter how well we spoke and wrote the King's English, or how faithfully we reproduced the canons of American literature and culture, our books remain foreign to the mainstream presses, and with a few notable exceptions, outside the scope of national awards. Now, thanks to your magnanimity, we will become more visible, recognizable as part of this grand cultural venture that is the creation and publication of books. Muchísimas gracias.
Wow, that was magnificent. I'm Tess Taylor, and I chair the Poetry Committee. In my other life, I am the on-air poetry reviewer for NPR's All Things Considered. This is something I've done now for 5 years, chairing this Poetry Committee, gathering 8 readers for the year, and then gathering them to make a list of books that the entire organization of 30 reads. And it's really special because, you know, I'm from San Francisco. We just lost our book reviewer at the San Francisco Chronicle. And I'm a poet, and I know that it's hard to make a conversation for poetry in this country, and to have this dedicated group of people who are reading all year and fostering this conversation about books and reading poetry together hungrily it's really joyful to come to this day and to be able to share and celebrate these books with you. So we read a lot this year. We were a spirited group. And our long list, I'm very proud of, in poetry this year is Ada Limón, The Carrying, Milkweed. Terrence Hayes, American Sonnets for My Pastor. Diane Seuss, Still Life with Two Dead Peacocks in the Door. Erica Meitner's Holy Moly, Carry Me. And last but not least, Adam Zagajewski's Asymmetry, translated by Claire Kavanaugh by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. It is my pleasure to be able to award this prize to Ada Limón. Book, The Carrying, Ada Limón asks, what if instead of carrying a child, I am supposed to carry grief? Among other things, the book is about pain in the body, about trying and failing to conceive, about struggling to care for the world and to care for the self. In the midst of her days, in parking lots, on the way to the doctors, as people and animals she loves die, Limón is also trying to bear herself and to make space for tenderness. These are poems where the speaker can tell her doctor that I'm made of old stars and so's he, and where a poem can watch bees, tipsy, sun-drunk, and heavy with thick knitted leg warmers of pollen. The self here is tough, is toughened, but also able to hold real gladness. In showing the struggle to keep the heart open, this book actually helps us each carry our own lives a little more bravely, too. Thank you, Ada.
Wow. I did not expect this. I have to write something because I'm a rambler. And I thought, well, if by any chance I actually win, I have to write something down, or also, yes, talk too much. Thank you so much for this honor. Muriel Rukeyser, in a poem, once asked what would happen if one woman told the truth about her life. The world would split open. But she never asked what would happen after that. After the splitting open. The truth is, we are just now figuring that out. Every year, another split in the world, and out of that, more voices of women. And in that vein, let me accept this great honor from the National Book Critics Circle on behalf of not only my fabulous fellow nominees, but on behalf of the women who were nominated in this category. And perhaps even beyond that, let me accept this in honor of all the women who wrote books this year. And beyond that, the women who are the reason we can and do write books. Because while writing may seem like a lonely venture, the introvert's isolated stadium, we know we never write in a vacuum. We write with all the good ghosts in our corners. I, for one, have never made anything alone. Never wrote a single poem alone. I made this book with my mother, who showed me how to create. I made it with my stepfather and my father, who taught me tenacity and storytelling, and my husband and his surprising willingness to be both my muse and my mirror. I made this book for mothers and women who are not mothers and maybe never wanted to be mothers. For my friends who told me the truth about their lives. I made this book with Daniel and Joey and Yana and everyone at Milkweed Editions, and Rob and Michael and Vaughn, who made me feel like what I made wasn't something to be shelved and silenced, but something worthy of the world. I made this book with the generosity of trees, with booksellers and librarians and reviewers and critics and everyone who has taught my book or shared it or sent it to a friend. I made this book with my teachers. I made this book with Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz and Aretha Franklin. I made this book with my grandfather who crossed a border and went from living in a chicken coop to becoming one of the first Mexican Americans to graduate from San Diego State. I made this book with everyone who didn't choose to be an artist, didn't get to choose to be an artist because something stood in the way, whether it was illness or money or pain or discrimination or trauma. I made this book with everyone who allowed me to choose that path of art. I have never done anything alone. I made this book with you and for you. So this award is in honor of all those shoulders I have stood on to be here. The real prize is the life you have given me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carlin Romano, and I chaired the criticism committee this year. I'd like to begin by saying I speak for my colleagues, but I think if I stick to that line, they will all get up and walk out, especially after our feisty afternoon. So I'll just speak for myself and saying thank you to the publishing community for still publishing collections of criticism. We know such books do not bring in much money, as poetry books don't bring in much money. And we know that we're facing endless articles like the one coming out in Harper's this week about the demise of book reviewing. But it seems to me you publishers are pushing back on that by continuing to publish collections and continuing to take seriously short work, and short work that ought to live and not be ephemeral. So I just want to say thank you for continuing. I had a rather large committee, 15 people, and we considered more than 100 books, and after a certain amount of blood on the floor, we came down to our 5 finalists this year. Our Robert Christgau, Is It Still Good to Ya? 50 years of rock criticism, 1967, 2017, Duke University Press, and boy, it's nice to hear people mention the Village Voice, where I started years ago. I miss VLS and the Village Voice. Stephen Greenblatt, Tyrant, Shakespeare on Politics. Terence Hayes, To Float in the Space Between, a life and work and conversation with the life and work of Lacey M. Johnson, The Reckonings, Essays. And Zadie Smith, Feel Free, Essay. And the award this year goes to Zadie Smith. Would you like an empty box? You can put whatever you like in there. If, as the famous line goes, personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then perhaps so is great criticism. Zadie Smith's collection, Feel Free, might so easily have become, like other books of its genre, an arbitrary collection of ephemera, a patchwork. But it isn't. Instead, it feels blazing and whole, with the inward gravitational tug of a star. Smith is such a sensitive observer that no matter where she takes her mind, not the subject she's addressing, is what remains most powerful there. In Feel Free, she fixes J.G. Ballard, Jay-Z, and Justin Bieber, among others, permanently in their places. The wonderful coherence comes from her. I offer these essays, Smith writes in her foreword, conscious that many of them come from the Obama era, quote, to be used, changed, dismantled, destroyed, or ignored as necessary, unquote. The offer is emblematic of the author's careful intellect and also superfluous. Indeed, the state of doubt in which we find ourselves at this strange moment of history is the one from which she has been writing all along. Do you want to interpret Smith's worldly inquisitiveness as a rebellion avant la lettre against the nativist parochialism of Brexit and red hats and walls? Feel free. Zadie Smith.
Thanks. I'm really touched. I'm just going to read something because it's better than the ramble on my part. First of all, thank you so much. I'd like to say thank you to Nick Laird for sharing so much with me, willingly and unwillingly, including the title of his poetry book, Feel Free, which I would also like to apologize for stealing. I'd like to thank God, my editor, who is here and who does such a good job of pretending whenever I offer her essays instead of a novel that she's off her head with joy. And I'd like to remember Bob Silvers, who was the late editor of the New York Review, for whom I wrote many of these essays. He was a model of rigor, of clarity, of engagement. He made you a better writer, deletion by deletion, query by query. The first essay I ever wrote for him was about Kafka, and a line from The Judgment always reminds me of him. It's the bit when the father leaps up out of bed and says to his son, "Now you know what existed outside of you. Until now you were only aware of yourself." Bob knew how to prompt writers, easily some of the most narcissistic people on earth, to think outside of and beyond themselves, to consider the work of other writers and artists, the politics of other places, the struggles of other peoples, and the past itself, which is always other by definition. I miss him, and I thank you.
Hello, I'm Lori Herzl, the books editor at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, and I'm the chair of the Autobiography Committee. We read a lot of really wonderful autobiographies this year, so wonderful that we could not pick 5, so we have a finalist group of 6. So here are the finalists. The Day That Went Missing, A Family Story by Richard Beard, published by Little Brown. All You Can Ever Know, a memoir by Nicole Chung. What Drowns the Flowers in Your Mouth, a memoir of brotherhood by Rigoberto Gonzalez, published by the University of Wisconsin Press. Belonging, A German Reckons with History and Home by Nora Krug, published by Scribner. Old in Art School, a memoir of starting over by Nell Painter, published by Citation. And Educated, a memoir by Tara. And this year's winner of the Autobiography Award from the National Book Critics Circle is Belonging, a German reference to history by Nora Krug. In Belonging, Nora Krug blends text and images into a kind of roadmap, taking her back to a German homeland that both comforts and confuses her. The visual components of the book range from drawings to cartoons to archival letters and photographs. Married to Krug's words, they create a stunningly effective, often moving portrait of Krug's memories and her exploration of the people who came before her. The questions lurk. Were my ancestors evil? Were they complicit? Were they merely surviving? As Krug circles closer and closer to the central facts,
she's forced to face the likelihood that these comforting stories are yet another way of deflecting a reality painful to live with. Throughout, Krug wrestles with the German idea of Heimat, a loose and perhaps untranslatable term for the landscape from which such a person springs. If your Heimat is a site, what if your Heimat is a site of collective guilt? Belonging suggests that these questions, unanswerable though they may be, are worth asking. Nora Krug.
Thank you so much. I feel deeply, deeply honored, and my grandfather is probably turning in his grave. But, I actually had two nightmares about this award. 2 nights ago, I dreamt I was horseback riding through London, and then I looked at my watch and I saw it was just half an hour to the reading, and the last train had already left. And then last night I dreamt I was falling asleep in the audience in my chair, and I was woken after the more deserving author had been awarded with a prize. So I'm glad that my dreams have not come true. I want to thank my publisher, Nan Graham, for being an immediate supporter and a lasting advocate for the project. Thank you so much for your trust and for making the book happen. I want to thank my editors, Lisa Mayer and Catherine Belden, for their hard work and their gentle but spot-on feedback, for their ability not only to help me make sense of the endless amounts of material I had amassed throughout my annoyingly obsessive research process, but also for providing the moral compass that allowed me to tell a story about World War II from a German perspective in a subtle but non-ambiguous way. You taught me not only how to be a better writer, but also how to be a better thinker. I also want to thank my publicist, Rosie Mahota, who's been working hard and who has made my work visible. I want to thank Elise Cheney of Cheney Literary for taking me on as one of her authors at a point when I hadn't the foggiest idea of what I was doing. And I want to thank especially my wonderful agent, Alex Jacobs, who was my faithful and tireless collaborator, consultant, and companion throughout the difficult 6-year process of researching, writing, and illustrating this book, who was able to locate and push the reset button inside my tortured mind at all times of day, including on the weekends. Thank you for your dedication. The greatest thing about working with all of you is, of course, that we have emerged from this project not only as collaborators, but also as friends, and I'll always be grateful for that. I always want to thank everybody here at Parsons and the New School, where I actually have been working for the past 12 years. We usually have our graduation and faculty meetings here, so it's not quite as glamorous in terms of the spatial, because I'm so familiar with the space. But thank you for everyone who's granted me the time off to work on this project, especially Deans Anne Gaines, Nadine Bourgeois, and Joel Towers, as well as Provost Tim Marshall and President David Van Zandt. I also wanted to thank the Guggenheim Foundation, the Paulo Krasner Foundation, and the Maurice Sendak Foundation for their support in completing the project. And I'm deeply grateful to my parents, and my brother, my aunts and cousins for answering all the difficult questions about our family that had never been asked before. My most heartfelt thanks, of course, goes to my husband, Stephen, who's accompanied me through this long process, who's reassured me over and over again, and often in the middle of the night, that I will eventually finish this memoir, who was my first editor and an honest critic of every single manuscript I rewrote, every single page I drew. Beyond just this book, I thank you for helping me figure out how to become an artist, a writer, and a human being. And I thank my daughter Ava for putting up with all of these strange women who came to our house to play with her and take her to the playground in my stead, allowing me to return to the drawing table. Finally, I wanted to refer to what Yadun Israel said so well yesterday, that the most important thing about this event is that this is an opportunity to thank our readers, to thank the critics for the very, very important work that you do in finding us and in making our voices heard, and to celebrate each other as writers. So thank you to all of you writers who are here tonight for your inspiration and dedication to what you do. Writing and drawing is an act of compassion. And if I learned one thing from making this book, it's that as writers and artists, we need to shed light on life's complexities, to dismantle our oftentimes stereotypical understanding of history, society, of ourselves and of each other, to continue to ask difficult and uncomfortable questions, and to unyieldingly advocate for a more humane society. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm Elizabeth Taylor, and it was my honor to chair the Biography Committee. Biography is just a phenomenal category. Biographies are just getting better and better, and these are the best of the best. This year's finalists are Flash, The Making of Weegee the Famous by Christopher Bonanos. 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret by Craig Brown. Inseparable, the original Siamese twins and their rendezvous with American history by Zadie. The Man in the Glass House, Philip Johnson, Architect of the Modern Century by Mark Lamster. The Big Fella, Babe Ruth and the World He Created by Jane Levy. Thank you. It was a phenomenal year for biographies. Biographies, as I said, are just getting better and better, and these are the best. And this year was a really hard choice, but the winner is Flash, The Making of Just as Arthur Felling, born in one of the poorest corners of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, transformed himself into Weegee, the world's greatest photographer, Christopher Bonanos has animated, enriched, and enlarged this single life story into a biography of noir New York and the emergence of an art form, journalistic photography. Drawing from his own rich visual sensibilities matched with wit and irreverence, Bonanos vividly captures how Weegee and his speed graphic camera beat the competition to capture the accidents and disasters, as well as high society of the 1940s New York with a distinctive noir touch. With the rigor and imagination, Bonanos ferrets the truth out of Weegee's self-mythology and captures in technicolor the arc of this pioneering photographer's life and work. In The Extraordinary Flash, The Making of Weegee the Famous, it's an extraordinary biography. Christopher Bonanos makes the compelling case that Weegee's enduring images functioned as little one-act plays, both comedy and drama. And here they are. Thank you.
This is not what I want. I looked at the list of previous winners, and I can't believe the list I'm on, so thank you all. Thanks, of course, to the Book Critics Circle. I've got to know a few of the board members as Twitter presences in the last couple of months, and met a number of them in the last 2 nights. And we all think of Twitter as a horrible garbage fire, but book Twitter is wonderful. I highly recommend it. Congratulations to the other nominees as well. I also want to mention in particular, Mark Lamster, who's a good friend. We're working at the same time and comparing notes and stressing, and you should read all the books. They're really good, and especially Mark's. Love it. For the group of people who made this book a book, thank you to Chris Dahl, who sold it, and to Mike Signorelli, who bought it and edited it, and to Serena Jones, who finished it off when Mike left the house. And of course, the group who worked with them at Henry Holt, all the people you don't hear about in an event like this, marketing and publishing and publicity, especially Declan for keeping me sane. Thank you. Of course, to Mom and Dad, and all the Lower East Side Greeks that came before them, Kaista, and most of all to my wife, Ellen, who is here. I, like many of you, write at night and on the weekends. I have a day job that keeps me busy, and we have a family, and I can't tell you how much she, who has a harder full-time job than I do, sort of ended up carrying the fire for a lot of things. There's so many times that she said, we're headed out, we're going to a movie or something, I don't even remember what it was, and she said, get something done. You've got 2 hours, so I got something done. A final point, if I could. Weegee lived most of his life as a freelance newspaper photographer, a long period of that sort of hand-to-mouth. And if there's one thing I know from my work as a magazine editor, it's that magazine and newspapers depend on people who kind of put together 2 or 3 part-time gigs and work a day job to support an arts career and edit during the day and write novels at night or whatever, sort of put together career they have. And a good friend of mine who I worked with used to say this whole enterprise, meaning the magazine where we work, this whole enterprise depends on fringe people. And, some of them are a little strange, and I mean that as a compliment. And they almost never make a lot of money. And almost nothing that gets published would get published without them. And Weegee was one of those people for most of his career. He lived in an awful little apartment on the Lower East Side and grubbed out a living. He got $5 a photo. He was a fringe person made good. And I have to assume, in this sort of strapped time for publishing in general, newspapers in particular, that a room full of newspaper critics may recognize some of this experience. It may resonate a little bit. So I thought, let's take a moment and cheer on all the fringe people.
Hi, I'm Carrie Arsenal, and I chaired the Nonfiction committee this year. I'm also book editor at Orion magazine. If you don't know what that is, Google it right now. We're going to actually expand book coverage, so that's... I hope my editor's not here. Nonfiction is a big topic, covers a lot of ground, and I think our books, the finalists this year certainly did. But I think they all had a sense of curiosity, all of them driving the narrative, curiosity about landscapes and history and self. In a lot of places. We went to, where did we go? We went to Texas. We went to our southern border. We went to the court of law. We went to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and safe spaces too. So the finalists this year for nonfiction, in alphabetical order, Francisco Cantu, The Line Becomes a River, Dispatches from the Border, Riverhead Books. Steve Coll, Directorate S, the C.I.A. and America's Secret Wars in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Penguin Press. Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, The Coddling of the American Mind, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure, Penguin Press. Adam Winkler, We the Corporations, How American Businesses Won Their Civil Rights, Liberate. And last, Lawrence Wright, God Save Texas, A Journey into the Soul of the Lone Star State by Knopf. So everybody gets the award for the longest subtitles. So the winner for this year's award for nonfiction is Steve Coll. I'll start talking about him before he gets there. Steve Coll's investigation into the United States' involvement with Afghanistan and Pakistan from 2001 to 2016 chronicles the tragic costs of the U.S. campaign to oust al-Qaeda and Taliban from Afghanistan after 9/11. Despite assistance from 59 countries, despite thousands of lives lost and billions of dollars spent, the effort failed. Strategic bungling and distraction from the war in Iraq helped sink the effort, but the shadow opponent in this epic struggle was the Pakistani Secret Service, the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, and its covert support of the Taliban through its secretive wing, Directorate S. The sequel to Coll's Pulitzer Prize-winning Ghost Wars, which I read at least 10 times when it came out, tallies the monstrous losses in this struggle: battlefield casualties, civilian deaths from military action and CIA drone attacks, murders of American and NATO troops by Afghanistan soldiers recruited by the Taliban. A landmark work of investigative reporting told with empathy for all sides. It's sad, frightening, and moving in its depiction of the human toll of the conflict. With his even-handed approach, gift for rendering character, and dazzling reporting skills, Coll has created an essential work of contemporary history. Congratulations.
Thank you. Sorry, I sat in the back because I was sure I was in no danger of winning. So I thank you so much for honoring this work. I feel greatly honored and deeply gratified. I just want to briefly thank all the people who made this possible. I have enjoyed so much good fortune, but in my professional life, probably the biggest part of it has been the stability I've enjoyed as a writer. I'm sitting back there with my literary agent, Melanie Jackson, who I've been working with for 35 years, and also with Anne Godoff, my editor, who I've been working with for 25 years. This book really started when Ghost Wars started, because it's a sequel to Ghost Wars, and that started when Anne called me maybe 6 weeks after the September 11th attacks and said, "Don't you want to write something about this?" And so we've been working together for a long time, and one of the things she's always made possible is for me to try to go big, go deep. I know they're long books, but to really try to make them complete. And I've just been so fortunate to have that partnership. I want to also just mention and thank my friends at The New Yorker who made possible some of this travel and support over the years that I was working on this, and my colleagues at Columbia, who also, when I came over there, I was in the middle of this book, and President Lee Bollinger really gave me a lot of time and support to finish it. And of course, my wife, Eliza Griswold, who's also sitting back there, we both brought out books last year. We can live to tell about it. I love you very much. I appreciate all that you did to make this possible, and we're just about to go do it again. So thank you very, very much. I'm really honored. I appreciate it.
Good evening. I'm Tom Beer. I'm the books editor of Newsday, and it was my great privilege to chair the NBCC Fiction Committee this year. We were a spirited group of, I think, 17 people in the end, passionate readers who felt strongly about the fiction, novels, and stories that we read this year. Anybody who thinks that the publishing industry is having a hard time, the amount of incredible fiction that we read would say otherwise. And we have 5 extremely strong finalists this year. They are Anna Burns' Milkman, published by Graywolf Press. Patrick Chamoiseau, Slave Old Man, translated by Linda Coverdale and published by the New Press. Dennis Johnson, The Largesse of the Sea Maiden, published by Random House. Rachel Kushner, The Mars Room, published by Scribner. Luis Alberto Urrea, The House of Broken Angels, published by Leonard. And it's my privilege to let you know that the 2018 National Book Critics Circle Award in Fiction goes to Anna Burns for Milkman. Unfortunately, Anna couldn't be with us tonight, but I believe her editor, Steve Woodward from Graywolf Press, is here to accept the award on her behalf. And I will read the citation. Reading Milkman is a singular experience. Burns's novel is as original in its presentation as it is profound in its exposition of the familiar and not so familiar terrors that daily assail its hero, a young woman coming of age in Belfast during the Troubles. Here, sectarian violence distorts everyday existence. Ordinary objects become signifiers of personal allegiance. Being surveyed is commonplace, and innocent comments are weighted with hidden meaning. The narrator evades assimilating this coded and dangerous world by immersing herself in 19th century novels as she ambles along the streets of her colorless district. Yet for all of its weighty themes, there is a lightness to Milkman. The novel is funny and full of warmth, and Burns's characters are wonderfully original in their idiosyncrasies. In this big, sprawling, and brilliant novel, Anna Burns brings us into a world hostage to misunderstanding and fear, but one where the human spirit and a young woman's resilience shine through. Thank you very much.
Well, I am honored to accept this award on Anna's behalf. She wished that she could be here, and she gave a brief statement for me to read to all of you. What a wonderful endorsement. I thank the judges of the National Book Critics Circle for nominating and then choosing my book for this prestigious award. I thank, too, all those involved in the NBCC, the critics, the book review editors, the student members and friends, for their passion for and their serious engagement with books and writing. It is happiness beyond measure to me to know that Milkman has spoken to so many people, especially when I don't know what will appear when I sit down with my pen, nor what will be the manuscript's journey afterwards when it's completed. I thank Graywolf, my lovely US publishers, for taking on my book and introducing it into America. Lastly, I'm only sorry not to be there this evening with you to convey my thoughts, feelings, and gratitude in person. Anna Burns. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for coming. That concludes the awards ceremony, but I really hope you'll join us for the reception. It's beginning now. It is just around the corner at the Star Foundation Hall at 63 Fifth Avenue, so not where it was last year, 63 Fifth Avenue. You can buy tickets at the door. Please do consider buying your favorite books outside from the Strand in the lobby. Many of them are signed by the authors. And last, please join me in expressing our gratitude one last time to all the brilliant writers who came here tonight.